everyone, what is up? I am Charlie Shrem, and I'm joined today with my good friend Phil Filet Mignon and my guest Gilbert Hill today. You are listening and watching Untold Stories, where twice a week for you, like 5 to 6 times a week for me, I get to talk to the brightest crayons in the box, the sharpest tools in the shed, the coolest people in the room, and the people that really are pushing this industry forward because, hey, like, where the hell are we going? And what is crypto? What is Bitcoin? Where do all these puzzles fit into that larger puzzle piece? Where do all these puzzle pieces fit into that larger puzzle that is, or what we call crypto? So thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Great to be here.
So, Gilbert, can I call you Mr. Hill?
Call me Gilbert, please.
Gilbert.
Oh, call me Mr. Hill, but Gilbert is my name.
Mr. Hill. Gilbert, we were talking earlier how, very, very briefly, how I didn't know this. There's a huge fundamental difference between how data is governed and owned in the EU versus in the US. And most people don't even know what that is. What is that major difference?
Well, the fundamental difference is that in the EU, and this is sort of enshrined with GDPR, which was like the Pandora's box, which blew all of this open. For the longest time, companies who process our data, do something with it, they don't own it. They're only custodians of it, and they have certain, have certain duties in terms of doing the right thing. The thing was that until very recent, until GDPR shone a light of that, lots of companies were assuming that it was their property and treating it as such, which is the situation you inherently have in the US. We all built, big lakes of data and we viewed it as an asset. What's happening now is that GDPR and other regulations actually led in the States by California, turning these lakes into toxic sort of sludge.
What do you mean toxic sludge?
Because it's getting to the point, I'm a technologist, and so the background is, when we were building a new app or a database-driven application, we take an approach of let's get all the data, and that was how startups monetize. But you get lots of data, you'd find a way to store it more or less securely, and then you'd work out a way to monetize it. What's happening now with regulation, regulation and also consumer awareness around data and data misuse and abuse, is that the risks associated with holding that data, unless you're doing something damn good with it, are outweighing the benefits that most organizations can get. Hence that analogy, we've heard so many times like data is a new oil, etc. I think if toxic sludge, I'm thinking more. It's more like it's the new nuclear power, and a lot of the data that we have, that we amass as organizations, are like those spent fuel rods. So one of the big challenges of the web now is how to DeSilo this data and either do something with it, or deal people in, or to decommission it safely.
I've heard that term DeSilo data a few times on the show, and that's what really one of the advents of blockchain technology is that one of the inventions of blockchain technology is that it allows you to have all this data all over and then make it so it's more permissioned. You choose who you want to give your data to. But going back to what you said, how did that all come about? Do you think that shift from, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that there was a shift of companies that wanted to amass so much data because it was seen as an asset or value. But now, the costs and inefficiencies that require you to hold on to that data, it's shifted. So now companies don't want to do that anymore. Where did that shift happen? Was it market-based shift? Was it just a crazy amount of regulation stifled and these companies don't want to hold data anymore? How did that kind of shift?
I think you've got different degrees of shift. So regulation moves pretty slowly, and a lot of what was in GDPR, which I've talked about as being a kind of watershed moment, already existed in previous regulations, more sort of analog regulations, but they were poorly understood and largely in many cases ignored. Um, what you have, with GDPR, it started a kind of a creeping barrage where regulators were aware. I think that regulators started to actually hire smart people who got data and understood what was being done with it, how it was being monetized, and also realized that you have this huge engine. So, I think the WEF said, World Economic Forum said that data's powering around 15% of the world's GDP. So you have this huge engine of growth. And regulators have realized that it's in danger of exploding. So I think regulators are working in concert across the world to try and um, you know um, take control of this out of control engine. At the moment, the other driver, which moves very, very, it's imperceptible until you've gone too far. You know how when we're being marketed to, you have that creepiness feeling when
Yeah.
the marketer, the invisible marketer, has gone too far, and and that sort of happens on a large scale with public opinion. So public opinion, for the longest time, people weren't aware of what was happening with their data, and that was misconstrued as like people don't care, and young people in particular, they don't give a monkeys about their data. They want to have
Oh.
be served ads. Actually, that flips very quickly, and we've seen that. Things like Netflix films like the
Social
Big
Dilemma,
Hack
Big
and
Hack.
Social Dilemma,
Yeah.
exactly. That and actually, I
Black
mean,
Mirror.
exactly with that.
That
That's
show is scary.
indeed. So it's proved that when you get that tipping point, which I think we've reached, then it becomes imperative for brands who have a business model which doesn't depend on aggressive monetization of data to create separation and get away from that. So you see FMCG companies, Unilever, treating
Mm.
data rights in the same way that they treat ecological concern. And also you have whole businesses like data brokers and the third party data trade. Their business models become unworkable almost overnight.
This tipping point that you talk about, I feel like kind of came and is currently happening over the last year or two. Just yesterday, I saw a meme on Instagram and it said, you don't need to know what your wife wants for Christmas because you just wait for, for your phone to show you ads of what she wants because our phones are listening to us. So really kind of like, well, my first question is that actually happening? To what extent are our phones listening to us? To what extent can a digital marketer reach the perfect consumer?
I mean, it's interesting. That's a question I get asked more than any other. And, the
Wow.
answer that phone manufacturers and platforms will give you is like, no, your phone is not listening to you. But we've all had that situation. I've got like a pet rabbit who generally hops around my home office here. And literally the other day we were talking about needing to get her some food and like a stocking from Santa. And lo and behold, ads for Bunny Munch started appearing in my
Yeah.
social. Now, I, the manufacturers would argue that's not the phone listening to us, that they have enough data points from our e-commerce history and other
No way.
legitimately
I don't
purchased.
believe it.
I don't
Well,
believe that.
well, and that's the thing. That's the thing, because we are being asked to put a huge amount of trust in an increasingly small number of trust hubs. And what's starting to happen now is that people are starting to doubt that. So, whether our phone, I don't believe that the phones are listening to us, because it implies that there's more kind of joined up strategy, like an evil plot, than there is. In answer to your second question, are marketers getting a super accurate picture of me and what I want? No, it's like a a poorly obscured rear
Yeah, it's
view
a
mirror
shot in the
view.
dark.
I'm getting served, and that's the thing. The first wave of kind of priv tech, which kind of socialized an idea of getting money from your data. For example, like Brave, you're still getting served ads for things that you bought a couple of weeks ago. I think it's a very inaccurate strategy for gaining customers, and also it's not really entering a dialogue. As someone with a marketing background, I find it super boring to just broadcast at people. I want to get into dialogues with customers and prospective customers as well.
In
And
a
I want to do that as part of a relationship of trust.
in a perfect world, if we see a situation where like I use a phone which has an operating system, and any of the anything I type or it hears or it records, I own that data, and then that OS has to seek my permission in order, or that, if it's Alphabet or if it's Apple or whatever, to like uh take my data and have a relationship with an advertiser with my data. How does that work in practice? Because I think that as a consumer myself, Phil's a consumer, you're a consumer. If you told me there was a permissioned way for me to control that spending data where I can actually seek out advertisers, I want that. I want discovery. We want music discovery. We want
Exactly.
product discovery. We want these things. If there was a better way to do it, do you think that's something that the majority of consumers believe or agree with?
Um, I think I agree, and I think they do. I think that what we've moved beyond is kind of from privacy per se to control. So actually, what you, Phil, me, and consumers want is to get the services that we appreciate, like streaming music, etc., um, and or shopping preferences, but to have control about when we're open to that. I think if you're looking at the future at the moment, if you think about what's the lowest common denominator. I mean, I got into the whole privacy space via cookie banners. So at the time, I was running a London web agency, and we were, building websites for clients and using all of this tracking technology without actually knowing where that data ended up.
This was pre-cookies. You were one of the pioneers of the concept of cookies on the internet.
Exactly, and as is often the case, we were kind of a Cinderella of Web 2, because we were building like ad tech solutions for the likes of MSN, and we hand them over to them, and they'd get the upside. What we also found is that when they started to get the hangover from this data
Yeah.
splurge out, that they went to us and said, "Great, we want to raise your profile. This is your problem. How are we going to deal with these new laws, which require you to disclose what you're doing with these cookies?" And guess what? Most organizations were unaware of what they were doing with tracking. And that for us was a big opportunity. We were able to, create software that would, categorize cookies, scan sites, and create those cookie bars. The cookie bars have now eaten the web because they've got to the point where they obscure the content. And they're still
What's a
the
cookie
only
bar? You mean like those toolbars?
the toolbars where it says, do you accept the cookies?
Oh
Which
my
less
God.
less of a thing in the States, but that's
No,
I'm
it's
part
my
of it.
mother-in-law has like 15 toolbars still on her Windows computer.
Exactly.
I just ignore them.
Yeah, you ignore them. Do you remember when cookies first came out, Phil? Like when cookies was a thing in the 2000s, we were like, what is on the computer? We were using our computers, and then we'd hear people say, oh yeah, they're tracking us now with these cookies thing. I remember like in high school. It's crazy.
I just want to chime in here. I think it also matters what the data is. For example, I don't mind Netflix tracking what I'm watching and cater to me a new movie. But when it comes to my Fitbit and my personal medical information,
oh yeah, that's a good point.
That's a whole different story. I also know some of these stores, they're using GPS tracking to see if you went into their store, and then they will cater specific advertisements to their products after you've left the store. Like, how do they know that I'm there?
It's an insane thing. Imagine if that same consumer data that you're talking about when you're tracking in a store worked if you walked into a hospital. Is that type of data regulated different? Is medical data regulated different than consumer data? Like, why is it not that I walk into my doctor's office, I don't see like an advertisement for like erectile dysfunction or something?
You
not
will
that that
soon.
should. Yeah.
I'm sorry for your loss.
I'm only 31 years old. I'm joking.
The answer is, I mean, in the States there are different rules pertaining to medical data and also financial data, and obviously the background to that is abuse in the past. In the the 60s and 70s, you had like practice of redlining, where whole communities weren't given access to life-changing opportunities like a loan or similar products based largely on racial lines.
Is
So
that
those
illegal?
It's hugely illegal, and it has been for a long time. But if you think
God.
now about the role, I mean, think about how all of this has been accelerated by COVID. there's so much AI being used, for example, in hiring processes, that with thousands of people applying for each, maybe MBA or an internship or whatever, there's huge amounts of AI of algorithms which are screening out individuals before they even get a chance to, in many cases, even get a chance to view that job. So
Mm.
that kind of engine, there's so many more data points from things like wearables, because a couple of years ago, there were fewer people who, your phone is obviously a massive tracking device, but I'm wearing a Fitbit, and actually since GDPR came in the EU, which is supposed to fix all this stuff, right? Most of the data has exploded. Most of the data in the world was created in the last 2 years, and it's growing exponentially. So it's actually, there are certain sectors where there are more protections, but actually, we take a holistic approach to, our online lives and trust, and there needs to be very wide ranging regulations which reflect that too, and also give agency to the consumer,
Yeah,
because
that's
I want to have that choice. I want to give my data to a charity. I want to get paid for my data, maybe from a market research firm, but I may not want to give my data at all to a particular political party. And that I think that's very much the direction of travel. If you can give people that control, they start to get more proprietary about their data, and they start to clean the data. So you start to get a better functioning engine. Because the other flip side of all that cookie stuff is that something like 70%, Guardian newspaper in the UK did like a mystery shopper exercise on all their intermediaries they were using for paid advertising online, and found that 70% was slipping via bots, via middlemen, etc.
wow.
This disintermediation that we've seen, DeFi is such a great example of that. And crypto is, that's stamped through crypto like British rock, um, is sorely lacking in the data space.
Do you like playing crypto and Bitcoin video games? I do. I like gaming all the time. Gaming has been around for so long, and companies like sportsbet.io and BitCasino, which is actually the first ever licensed Bitcoin casino, have been around for so long, owned by a great company called Coin Gaming. Coin Gaming is a sponsor of Untold Stories. They are fun, fast, and fair. Super cool company run by some really, really cool crypto OGs. The CEO of Coin Gaming used to actually heat his house in Estonia. That was like negative 25 degrees Celsius. He used to heat his house mining for Bitcoin. So these are the people that you're playing games with. It's all transparent. You can see everything on the blockchain. These are some really great people, some great games to play. So if you want to drive crypto awareness together, if you got a question, or if you fancy connecting with the team of dreamers and doers, make sure you check them out, reach out to them, coingaming.io. That's the website to check out.
So for many of the countries that BITTREX Global serves, there's no easy way for investors to purchase stocks like Apple, Tesla. In fact, just the other day, I personally wanted to get involved in the Airbnb IPO, but I couldn't. There's no way to get tokenized stocks. Or is there? This will be the first and only way that BITTREX Global customers can access the US stock market and legally own US stocks from anywhere in the world. Tokenized stocks. It is so cool. So these shares are tokenized, and it's possible to buy like a fractionized portion of a stock. So for example, like Berkshire Hathaway, I think trades at $300,000 a share. Now through BITTREX Global, you can actually just buy $300 worth or $500 worth or even $1 worth of a stock. And then these tokenized stocks are legally bound to the stock itself, and it trades exactly like the stock does. It's beautiful. It's actually what blockchain is supposed to do. It's why we're here in the first place. This is bringing about the next level of these like credit and capital markets, and it's allowing global people all over the world to participate in some of the coolest companies that are based in America today, or even companies around the world. Like I could see so many different applications of this one utility. Stocks on the U.S. stock market only trade between like 9:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. Just the other day I had to Google that because I don't even know that. But because these assets are tokenized, they're going to trade 24 hours a day. And not only that, like individual stocks, but investors can also invest in the whole like S&P 500. They can get into all these indexes just through BITTREX Global's tokenized stock. It's so cool. Make sure you check out global.bitrex.com/discover/tokenized-stocks. We're going to have it in our show notes. This is one of the front-running new on the front lines application of blockchain technology, and you guys are going to have so much fun with it. Well, speaking of rocks, you were an archaeologist prior in your past life, or a lapsed archaeologist, as on your Twitter bio. What type of lessons do you think you learn from that? Into coming into data and then coming into crypto.
I think it's weird because I've worked in banking and I've
You've
spent
done
a lot of time
everything.
talking about privacy. Yeah, I'm super unemployable, Charlie. So I've the thing that comes back to me more and more from archaeology is how dangerous it is, obviously, to project our current, social mores and preconceptions onto the past, but also onto different social groups as well. I mean, there's a real danger as well with data. In the run up to the US election in particular, and we've seen this here in the UK as well with Brexit and things like that.
Yeah.
There's been, weaponization
Of data. Yeah.
And I mean, that's the sort of dark side of that kind of annoying. Is my phone listening to me? That there, in the run up to the US election, on both sides, you had a situation where data, so public pools of data are being used and blended with records, or things like the NRA database, which are being sold out. And you had
that's how they're getting my information, all these different fake, all these things I get in the post in the mail is just because I joined the NRA 4 or 5 years ago as a joke or something, and now I get shit all the time. It's all NRA, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I mean that's annoying, but I mean the flip side of it was that there were people getting text messages with misinformation about whether they were eligible to vote, documents they needed to take, and when. So there's it's really ripe for a rebalancing.
Okay, so it's actually interesting. I can't even legally own a gun, and I still get so many ads for guns. Yeah, in the U.S., for life, they have. If you're a felon, if you've committed a crime, you lost your rights for your whole life. I mean, that's not even written in the Constitution, but yeah, in the U.S. you lose life rights. You lose your life rights to vote, participate in civic duty, own a gun. You basically become a second-class citizen for the rest of your life, even if you've done all your time. It's a shitty situation. But I don't want to talk about that today.
And you don't need a gun, Charlie.
No, and I don't need a gun. I really don't. Everyone else around me has guns, so I'm in pretty good shape. I got these guns. I got these guns right here. Okay, so let's talk about Tap My Data, because everything that you're talking about leads into this. And it leads into this de-siloing of data. And you've created a situation, you've created a company and an app that allows people to store their personal info and whatever information they want to start putting in there into their own secure locker. And you have check-in locations that allow people to share some of these things with people they trust. And you're starting from the ground up. You have this chicken and egg problem as I see it, because you got to get a lot of people and then you got to get a lot of the advertisers. But that's not my question. What's interesting when I was doing the research is that you talk about this thing called a data dividend, which is to me is kind of a form of universal basic income for people deciding to join this new trust economy. Where did you get that concept? How did that all come about?
I'd like to say I invented it, but I didn't. There's been a movement on both sides of the Atlantic. So you've got Andrew Yang with his Yang Gang. They were talking. I mean, you do have a situation where, as I mentioned, data is it's $1 trillion part of the economy, and we're not seeing any of that. And there've been various attempts to, how do we repatriate that? You've got a situation where lots of this economy is, again, you've got companies which are large enough and agile enough to outrun, tax, the tax environment in a specific geographic area. How do we recirculate some of that cash? And I think a number of projects approached this in either trying to plug into that existing system, the data
Yeah.
trade system. So I think we've all downloaded those apps which say, hey, make money from your data. We're Robin Hood of data. And then you download it, and then it says, all you need to do is do some surveys. And you go, oh, crap, I don't want to do surveys. I want to, there's always been that either trying to plug into that,
Yeah.
or they've been very kind of worthy. So there's been a drive of sort of academic apps which have been about, trying to create a complex privacy cloud of me. Problem is, and I was talking to someone about this, a market data specialist this morning, who was saying that in the UK, women over 50 are kind of invisible to market insight companies
Interesting.
because they don't play the games, either literally or the sort of content data harvesting games that other demographic groups do. They've got better things to do with their lives.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
About that really quick? So growing up, my grandma would watch like TV, and she'd buy stuff on TV all the time. This is like 10, 20 years ago, before the internet, really. How did that shopping network get consumer data from my 60-year-old grandmother then?
Well, back then, if she was, I'm guessing, but if she was doing that, she probably also liked doing things like catalog shopping.
Yes.
So again, that's sort of what I'm aiming at. Lots of when you think about, Jamie Burke and others have talked about, the Web 3. If you think about the first incarnation of the web with Tim Berners-Lee was about machines communicating with each other. The Web 2 was where we became the product. And that was kind of all that data, that new data was plugged into those old kind of Sears catalog outputs. And when you think about a lot of the third-party data trade, it's using super, super sophisticated technology to still go through very kind of like mid-20th century sales funnels. And it doesn't feel right for the consumer because, as we say, it feels creepy. And at worst, it's getting weaponized. And it doesn't work for the advertisers either. So there is very much a need for to engage the consumer and make it clear that you've got their back, and that things like GDPR are super complex. There's 99 articles in GDPR, and I'm not a privacy lawyer, so I'm not qualified to analyze each of those in detail. Many lawyers would argue, but if I can communicate the essential elements of that and put that in the hands of a consumer with consumer grade tech, then they have a tool to start to chip away at that. And that's what Tap My Data was doing. Rather than try and get too big, we focused on one right, which was, I don't know where my data is. It's probably out there. We found that the average person has like data held with 115 organizations.
Yeah.
And each of those have got a record of you with all the inherent risks of getting hacked, or it being wrong, or sharing it with the wrong person, or it blending into, one data set, a data set blending into another to create a false positive, which could really impact your life chances.
Oh, I wonder if I could like trick all these apps, like create like 10 versions of Charlie consumerism or something, like be all radically different. I wonder if anyone has ever done that experiment.
You could, and people have, but if you could turn it on its head and say, I hold the master record of my data, and when I'm in the mood to buy, like say my car, the windscreen wipers, the rubber's perished on them because it's always raining in the UK.
You share the data.
Yeah, exactly. I open the ports on my personal data store and say, I would like you to quote me happy on the thing that I'm interested in now. No more of that kind of rear view mirror stuff. But you have to get people into that in a very simple way, which is why we focused on that one question with Tap My Data initially, which was, have you got my data?
Yeah.
Can I have it back, please? Using those rights enshrined in the regulation.
When you download a new game on your phone, what type of data are they taking from us?
Whatever data you consent to. And I think that's, comes back to our early point that consent is the kind of bedrock on which all of this.
But where is their consent? I've never been asked to consent.
It's buried in line
The policies.
175 of the legalistic T's and C's that you're not meant to read. And that's a problem. It's been stretched and stretched, and you get to the point where it's like the kind of boy who cries wolf, that no one believes. When I click on the cookie banner and say, yeah, I accept, I want to read the content, I don't believe my rights are being respected,
Wh-
which actually devalues that asset, because now companies are getting called on that. That consent is being exposed as not valid. In the UK a few weeks ago, the UK regulator did a kind of a did the nuclear option on Experian, a credit
Oh
rating
yeah.
agency, which basically for the first time they said, we're not going to fine you, because they found that they were misusing consent. So you're giving consent for one thing that you need. I need a loan, so I want you to run a credit check on me. Fine, that's a fair deal. That's an exchange of,
Yeah.
I'm getting something of value for that. I can take that, and that's going to be useful to me. They found that they were using it for all sorts of other stuff, and it was being they'd lost control of it. What the ICO, the UK regulator, said was, if you don't get your house in order within 9 months, we're going to stop you from processing data. That shuts them down overnight.
Wow.
And so that's an extinction level event for the data trade. That's why it's that's why we're seeing
That's
things like
crazy.
Tap My Data and other elements of the PrivTech community, which used to be kind of like the cottage industry. All of a sudden, these companies are getting funding. Just yesterday we had we had our second privacy tech unicorn. In that one's based in Israel.
Which one?
We've got a Big ID, and then in the
Okay.
States we've got OneTrust, who I sold my last company to. They're based in Atlanta. So we're
How,
seeing this start to coalesce. But you've got to approach a consumer in a very accessible way, and that was what was missing. And that's what we tried to fill with Tap My Data. Make it simple for people and keep their
well,
trust.
when a company gets a data breach, what does that actually mean? And then in the context of what you just said, how would it be different, right? So like my data is encrypted on my phone. You're using crypto and blockchain technology to allow it to be like permissioned, so I control my data and I can push it out, as opposed to a poll using. Well, all these regulations that come out over the next year or two, will it benefit our industry, or will it be like negative for all of privacy, even if you're a crypto company like you?
I think we're going to have to get used to doing more with less, in terms of that thing that I was talking about, like, let's get all the data. Those days are gone. That kind of Wild West situation, and actually, the risk associated with that has outstripped our ability to monetize it or make other use of it. I think ultimately anything that there are various projects at the moment which are trying to boil down all this legal stuff into lines of code. And I think that's very, that's something that the crypto industry does really, really well. At the moment, if I want to exercise all my rights and for a company to manage them, and if I change my mind, it's hugely complex for all
Yeah, it's
parties,
too much work.
and it adds friction, which is why it's not working. But if I can wrap my consent preferences in a smart contract, and then that can be, have certain data associated with it based on a call from an advertiser, then you start to get advertisers asking for the data they need and a genuine exchange. And the way, the beauty of the blockchain, I remember, being shown examples when I was knee deep in cookies a few years ago. The blockchain was starting to become popular and was being, use cases were being like things like tracing the provenance of gems and stuff like that. And I don't have many precious gems in my life, but I was, the dealing with data rights and privacy is a fantastic real world use case of this, because we have a problem with all of this. The data trade, every company marks their own homework. You talk about breaches. They say everything's fine here, sir, until there's a catastrophic breach. You can use a blockchain as that central statement of record, so that every time a company asks for an aspect of my data, or I share some of my data, that's being, a transaction is being made on the public blockchain. In our case, we did that on the Stellar blockchain.
Oh, nice. I love those guys. Jed is a good friend of mine, and Stellar is a great blockchain. I know a lot of projects that are, Stellar is that blockchain where I am seeing the most long-term projects being
Right.
built. Like projects that say, give us 6 months to a year to build this out. We're not doing anything right now. Whereas some other chains are like, we want to get on the fastest chain possible. So I will say that about Jed and those guys. They've built an amazing, amazing product. You know, you're talking about, and used the word transaction a second ago. Well, everything we're talking about is like a symbiotic relationship in the best of worlds. I have data. I walk into a store. Can I share it? I'm getting a benefit. They're getting a benefit. But I've talked to a lot of people that believe, and you and I haven't talked about this at all yet, that me as a consumer can actually get paid for that data. So really, like, how is, and that to me is like, doesn't really, it's like Brave is giving me what, 10 cents to look at an ad. Like in the long run, it doesn't really, how is data actually priced? What is the most expensive data that an advertiser would be willing to pay for to have accurate data on a consumer? Like what type of data cost, like, has more value? Where is the tier? And could you ever see a situation where we're being paid now for this data that we own and sharing?
Absolutely. I think one of the problems is that the answer to that is it's opaque,
Uh,
because at the moment we're not getting any of that money from our data. Absolutely, there's varying values of data based on as we mentioned, if it's healthcare data, if it's financial data, is worth far more than like browsing history, general browsing history, or
well, let's look at
social history
COVID
data.
data, for example. Let's look at COVID data. There's all this data now of who had COVID, how many times you were tested. It's all out there. Could that ever be sold? Like, could the fact if I have the antibodies for it, now potentially I am a potential advertiser for a hotel, for example, because now I've had COVID. I've had, not that I've had it. I'm just using an example. But could that ever be sold? Could you see something like that?
Potentially, yes, as long as you're in control, and that's what's absent, and also
Because
that
that would
there's
be
that
awesome.
that it would, and that's
Or
what's
scary.
missing. And I think
Yeah.
um, Brave are really important because they've socialized the idea that your data has some value and there is some agency. I think what blows it open is actually the notion that I can take elements of my data and I can do pricing discovery in a decentralized, data market, say like Ocean. At the moment, the only way I can do that is if I'm pretty crypto savvy, right? But if I can have a situation where there is a user-friendly piece of consumer-grade tech to help me chop up bits of my data that I'm happy to share, put it out there either directly or via an intermediary. So something that we're seeing coming in the EU is like data unions. So I may have, it may be the NRA, or it may be my church, or it may be the Scouts or something. I may have there are groups that exist already who I trust, that I can then entrust that kind of data brokerage too. So combined with decentralized data markets, you can actually do the price discovery out
Ah,
there. So I can put my data out there
tokenized
and say,
data.
yeah, exactly. So I can basically say, okay, what do you want to pay me for my data? Whereas at the moment, I've got to take what you give me and be pathetically grateful. And I think that what's interesting from a DeFi point of view is like a couple of years ago when I was getting my loft here converted because no one can afford to buy a bigger house in London. Um, all my builders, that was the last sort of crypto rush, and all my builders were going, "Hey Gil, are you like trading this crypto stuff?" And I got massive FOMO because I wasn't
Yeah.
at the time. They were all trading it. What's different now and interesting is that the characteristics of this bull run is that coins led by Bitcoin are getting acceptance as a kind of mainstream treasury instrument, and so the builders are less interested because it's less accessible for them. Whereas everyone, not everyone has crypto to stake and get and can play in
Mm.
DeFi, but everyone has data. And I think that's the missing kind of rocket fuel for this threat in terms of regulation that isn't going away. And also the opportunity that I really believe that crypto offers. But crypto and blockchain are super elegant ways to break that open. And actually GDPR was very much in the spirit of that. It wasn't necessarily about shutting businesses down. It was about creating more of a level playing field. If I can fork the code base from Ocean and set up a data union, I can become the house in my, for this new kind of data economy that me and others are talking about.
And that's what you guys are pushing on doing. I see now already our listeners can download the Tap app. They can put the data they can go in and put some of their into their secure data locker, and then start to play around with this concept of being able to have permission data, share your data, and get, potentially get paid for it, earn it. But at the lowest level, at the same time, this crypto world is blowing open the possibility for, forget just getting paid for it, but being able to control it and being able to know when you're sleeping at night that these are the companies that have my data. These are the ones that I'm sharing with them to do that, and I'm giving them permission. And at the end of the day, the more control that we have about our own social lives. That's why we're all in crypto, right? Financial control, informational independence, and all these things. That's why we're here.
Absolutely. No keys, no crypto, as they say. And like it's the keys to your data.
Gil, thank you so much. Gilbert Hill, that's all the time we have for today, everyone. Gilbert Hill, you're the CEO of Tap My Data. I'll have all the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time right before the holiday season and talking about what you've been doing. We're going to be releasing this episode next week, and so you're in the midst of doing a lot of crazy things within your protocol, and everyone can check out the show notes, can see what you guys are up to, follow your blog posts, follow you on Twitter, and get more information about controlling their own data. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. This podcast, Untold Stories, is produced by the Blockworks Group. Our executive producer is Jason Yanowitz and Reed Hannaford. Our show is researched and written by Rafael Rubio, and our chief audio engineer is Wayne Dallaire. Thank you so much, Phil A. Mignon, for coming on the show today. I am your host, Charlie Shrem.